Hi everybody, we're back. It's been a long time. I'm Abi Twomlow. And yeah, it's been quite a long time since we recorded one of these, but I've been busy having a baby, so yeah, that's taken quite a lot of my time. But we're here today to talk about the difference between stress and worry and anxiety, because I think it's quite difficult to differentiate between the three. And I don't know about you, Andrew, but I find that the word anxiety is thrown about a huge amount these days, and actually sometimes, well, actually a lot of the time it's not anxiety, it's stress or it's worry as well. And I don't think we really know the difference these days.
No, well, yes, welcome back, everyone. It's nice to be here. And I mean, that's some excuse, Abby, for not having a podcast for a while.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I know. There you go. Yeah, actually, talking about worry and anxiety and stress, because we've not done something like this for a while, I think I probably had a bit of worry, anxiety and stress to do with what we're doing at the moment. But you're right, those three words are often bandied about meaning the same thing. It's a bit, I suppose it's a bit like when people say they've got flu when actually they've just got a cold. So yeah. What might be a simple definition from your point of view?
I mean, really stripping it down to the sort of most simple explanation, I think worry is something that happens in the mind. That's something that you know, if you're not sleeping, you can't think, you're thinking about something over and over again. Worry happens in the mind. Stress is something that happens to the body. It's a physical and normal, I'd just like to add, response to a current threat or situation. Whereas anxiety is that same kind of physical response, but to something happening in the mind. So you sort of create that same stress response, but to a thought or a worry.
Right. Yeah. Worries always tend to be about sort of negative things. Oh, I hope it doesn't happen, something like that. But a lot of people think that's anxiety. So yep. I know you've mentioned that there about in the mind, but do you think length of time that you have something would help there?
I think worry tends to be something quite present. It's something that's happening now. You tend to be worrying about something that's going to happen tomorrow, or you know, can I afford this? It's something that's it's fairly short term, worry is, and it's about something specific. Whereas I think anxiety a lot of the time can be creating a real physical stressed response about something that either hasn't happened yet or is not likely to happen. We also call it anticipatory anxiety. And it's all about the stories and our imagination, the things that we tell ourselves in our brain. And anxiety is hugely to do with that. It's not to do with a real life situation quite often. It's about a picture that we've built in our own mind that we're creating a stressful response to, that we're laying awake over, we are worrying about at the same time. But anxiety is that physical response to that worry.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So anxiety in effect is like us going, well, what if yeah. and then we get one what if, and we sort of build on that one what if with another what if, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and whys and hows, and it's all those questions. Definitely a lot of overthinking and lots of trying to answer questions that aren't really relevant a lot of the time, and they certainly never get you a solution. You spend all this time worrying and getting stressed and feeling anxious about something that you never get to the end of. It just feels like it spirals and spirals, and you actually feel less and less in control the more you worry and think about it.
Anxiety does or can lead to stress.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose if you look at stress without the anxiety, if you just look at stress on its own, stress is a normal, really important response. Actually, it's something that your body is designed to do, is to create a stress response. And it's essential that we have it, because actually it can save life. If you are walking down an alleyway and somebody jumps out at you and holds a knife to you, I don't know about you, but I certainly would create a stress response in that moment. I would definitely be stressed. My heart would start racing. I would be sweating. I'd be feeling that panic. That's normal. You need that to happen, because in that moment, you're either going to put up a fight or you're going to run for your life. It's your fight or flight response. So that stress response is really important. But what happens at that time is your brain releases chemicals into your body to either help you run or to fight. So your body needs to produce more energy. So it gives you more adrenaline, and it gives you something called cortisol, which goes into your body as well, both of which can really help you in those situations. But those chemicals are only supposed to be in your body short term, just to deal with that situation as well. So that stress response is really important, and it's a completely normal response. But I know that you were telling me a story about somebody in a similar situation to that would have a very different response to us, because actually, even though that's a normal response, how you react in those situations is still about a story that you tell yourself in your head. It's still about how you envisage something to go. I don't know if you want to share what you were saying to me before.
Yeah, I know of somebody that their partner was a former SAS soldier, and one night they were coming home from somewhere, and they were sort of mugged, in a sense, with the guy with a knife saying, give me your money, otherwise I'll stab you. And the chap, he just laughed, really, and which annoyed the robber, if they still use that term for people that do these things, and he just said, give me your money, and he said, look, just go away, otherwise you'll be in the police station in 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes later, he was in the police station, and the reason was that the SAS training kicked in, so it wasn't such a situation that, whereas you and I would be either frozen to the spot or would be doing the 100 meters down the road. So as you say, it again is the way that our brain works in reaction to those things.
Yeah, it's still your brain and your thoughts that create that response, even in those stressful situations. But that response is normal. And even the SAS guy might have still had to put up a fight. His body probably still needed that increase of energy and that heart rate to go up, and his digestive system to kick in, because he'd still need that burst of energy if he was going to put up a fight. But that, I think, is the difference between stress and anxiety. That stress is a response to something that's happening to you right now, whereas anxiety is creating the same response a lot of the time. It's putting adrenaline and cortisol into your body a lot of the time. We still struggle with sleep. We still have an increased heart rate quite often. Sweaty palms people get when they're anxious about something that's not actually happening at that moment. And the long-term impact of that stress response and those chemicals being in your body long-term are actually quite detrimental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. However, stress can also occur when good things are happening. For instance, if you've got a new job or something like that, you're about to get married or something, your body can really feel it.
Yeah, you still get that adrenaline side of it, don't you?
Yeah, and so whereas worry tends to be about negative things, stress can be about both, but we tend to associate stress with something not so good, bad, harmful. But like you say, if we sort of have that stress for too long a period, then that can cause all sorts of different issues.
Well, and physical health issues as well. The research is there to show that people that suffer long-term stress are much more prone to things like heart disease, strokes, infertility, cancer. There's a whole list of health issues that go along with long-term stress. You'll probably be able to list them better than me. My baby brain's kicked in. I can't remember them.
Oh, you're doing very well. You're doing very well. And so that's why a lot of the sort of tips for helping with that sort of thing are to get enough sleep and exercise and eat healthily and just practice relaxation, things like yoga and the like. It just allows you to relax, calm down. And all of those things basically are in the moment.
Yeah.
So your imagination is not going, what if, and all of that.
It's about breaking the cycle, isn't it? So those things are really good at that moment when you're feeling stressed. But in terms of anxiety, they tend not to help long term. I don't know if you agree with me there. Because actually, you just have to keep breaking the cycle every time. And actually what you need to do in terms of the anxiety is not create it in the first place, or learn to change that thinking pattern. Because if anxiety is a physical response to something happening in your brain, then you need to change the thing that's happening in your brain. Breathing exercises are only going to calm you down when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling stressed. And actually, yeah, the ideal thing is to learn not to do that in the first place, to have your thoughts under control so that the feelings don't spiral. So what would be what advice would you give to people? I mean, have you got any different way of differentiating stress, worry and anxiety? Because I gave the real basic explanation there. Is there anything that you want to add to those things?
Not really, because unless you're willing to get into quite intricate detail, which can be baffling and seem as though you're talking about the same thing but using different words. I like the way that you explained it. Because it's probably best just to keep it simple. I mean, a way that I often explain, and it's not technically necessarily exactly right, but it gives an idea, is anxiety is basically about the way that we think. And as you said, anticipatory anxiety is a sort of can be about what if, or I hope you like me, or something like that. And then if that goes on too long, that can lead to a stressful situation. And then you become more anxious, which then increases the stressful part of it. But some people would argue that stress can come before anxiety. So now you see how I'm getting round and round and round here. And so that's why your explanation is much better, because it was simple, straightforward, and not going to go round and round and round in that way.
I think the other thing with anxiety, you were just saying about that being, spiraling and creating more stress and more of a physical response. I think a lot of people with anxiety that I work with, to try and avoid that, they just avoid things altogether. So they actually stop doing things. They withdraw themselves from certain things because it makes them anxious or stressed. So they just don't do them at all.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes them feel like they've solved the problem, but it doesn't solve the problem, because if you find yourself there by accident, then actually the response would be even worse.
That's true. You're just sort of masking it in one way, not exposing yourself to it, which might be fine. And in one sense, that can take care of it. I mean, if you're scared of snakes, then you don't necessarily need to go places where there's snakes. Or if you have emetophobia, for instance, the fear of vomiting, you can't sort of avoid the potential for that to be anywhere. So I
mean, there's some things like being scared of flying. You could avoid that, but actually, that potentially has an impact on your life, or you're not going to be able to do certain things that you'd love to do, or they become much more difficult just because of that. And it actually solve the problem, does it?
Mm-hmm. No, and then it becomes that, and I think we've talked about this in other podcasts. So if you are one of our followers, you may have heard this before. If not, delve into the archive. It then brings into the Coué's law idea, where there's sort of fact and imagination in opposition. Imagination tends to win. 99% of the time. So you're getting away from what you could call a fact.
Yeah, and we also know that imagination has a physical impact on your body as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know that if you close your eyes and think about your favourite food, I'm sure we've done this on one before, that you start to salivate, you normally smile, and your digestive system kicks in because your body doesn't know, well, your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So if you're spending a lot of time imagining things going wrong, imagining people not liking you, imagining a situation going wrong, your body is going to respond to that as if it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. And that's when it does start creating stress, and that stress response, keeping you awake, increased heart rate, irritable bowel syndrome. So we quite often get stomach aches. I have a lot of clients that suffer with tummy aches, or like even when I was teaching children with, I used to call it worry tummy, because they used to get tummy ache quite easily as soon as a little thing was going wrong. But yeah, irritable bowel syndrome is one. Teeth grinding, headaches, migraines. Your body is having a physical response to your imagination, to the things that you're thinking, those pictures and stories that you're telling yourself in your head all of the time.
Yeah, most people don't realize that the way that they think has an enormous effect on their physical body. Actually, if people do sit down and think about it, they will realize that the thoughts that they have do affect them. Here's a little bit of homework for you. You can have a sit down and just think of something and just see or think how it might affect your body, or how it has done. Just notice how that is.
Or work backwards from something it's quite helpful as well, because you can't have a feeling without having the thoughts first. So if you think of a situation where you feel something really strongly, whether that be I'd say positive and negative, but I'm going to say whether that was a good experience or a not so good experience, think about the thoughts that you were having, the split second or a few seconds before that. You had to have the thoughts to create that feeling, whatever that feeling was. And if you can pinpoint something specific and work backwards from that moment, you'll probably understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, when you were talking there, anger came to mind. Not because of what you were talking about, but
sorry.
But no, how there's a situation can arise out of nothing, and we respond to that situation with thoughts, and those thoughts are, that's not fair, that's not right, blah 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 blah, and we get this feeling of the emotion of anger, and so on. And what that can then do is like your heart rate goes, and your blood pressure can go up, and your ability to think laterally disappears, and you can sort of verbally lash out, even if you don't lash out in a physical way. And when all that's over, that's not only had a physical and a psychological effect on yourself, it's affected the people around you. That then, if it's, say, at work, your colleagues will think of you differently, etc. And it has a real ripple effect. And like you said, that tends to come from a situation that there's a thought that develops into an action, but it has a really strong, stressful effect on every part of our body.
Well, only depending on the thoughts that you have, really, because if you put 100 people in exactly the same situation, they would all respond differently. So it's not the situation that's creating that stress or anxiety. It's got to be the thoughts that is creating your response and your actions as well, or your behaviour, because everybody would respond slightly differently. Some people wouldn't be angry at all. They'd laugh, or they'd just walk off, or they'd be quite nonchalant about it. Some people would be to the absolute extreme. But yeah, people would have a different response to the same situation.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. We don't perceive the same factual thing in the same way. Identical twins don't tend to do that.
Yeah.
So the general population will see things, and the way that we see things is coloured by the way we see things. And that can lead us all into another conversation another day. But
I mean, there's some great quotes out there in psychology, isn't there? There's one that goes something like, "There's no such thing as reality, only our interpretation of it," and that's really true, isn't it? It's all about how we interpret things, and everybody interprets things slightly differently. And I think that's the same whether it's worry, stress, or anxiety, actually. But I think people that struggle with anxiety are in the habit of interpreting things in a lot more negative way or an unhelpful way, and then they overthink about it a lot.
And the thing about that also is not only do you tend to interpret things in a more negative way, or effectively it's a wee bit like having a hand in front of your face, and it blocks out everything around you. And if you when you are able to work with anxiety or worry or stress, you're effectively moving that hand away. And so you're seeing lots of other things and interpreting things in a different way. But I come back to this thing. If, for instance, if you've got a partner that is always negative, always having unhelpful thoughts about things, then, and you are not of that same nature, that can be extremely wearing, and it then creates conflict. So all of these things have an effect somewhere along the line, and that's why I think it would be a good idea if people knew some little techniques at some time to try and help them, whether it's just with understanding, actually even understanding it's okay to worry sometimes, is actually quite useful, as opposed to
I think that's the idea of this podcast, isn't it, today? That I'd love people to go away and question whether what they're thinking, you know, is it just a worry? Am I just worried? And actually, is that okay? It's fine to be worried. Am I just stressed? Am I creating stress about something? And do I need to? Is it a real situation that I need to be stressed about? Or actually, is my imagination just taking me to a place where I'm worrying and creating stress about something that's not even happening? Because that's where the anxiety starts coming then. And again, do you need to do it? Really question your thoughts and put them to task, if you like, you know, set judgment on them. Are they true? Are they necessary? Are they helpful? Are those thoughts helpful? If they're not, don't waste your time on them. Swap them for something more helpful, or think about something else.
That reminds me of sometimes, I'm sure you do this, Abi, but I sometimes ask people to put their thoughts on trial. To have, imagine you're going before a court, and you've got this thought, you're charged with this thought. What's the evidence for it? And by the way, just because you think something doesn't mean that that's evidence for it. It just means you think about it. And what is the evidence against that thought? And sort of tot up those things, and it can be quite useful for people, even just doing the exercise of thinking about the way they think.
One thing I always add to that as well is, would somebody else agree with that? It's would somebody else with a different opinion agree? Would they see something? Would they see this differently? Because that can be really helpful, especially if you know somebody that you consider to always be cool-headed and calm and have really good mental health. How would they think about it? Would they be agreeing with me? Would they see this the same way, or would they be looking at it a different way? It's called elastic thinking, I think, when you look at something from somebody else's perspective. So yeah, when you're putting your thoughts on trial, as you put it, that's a good way to do it as well. Have a look at it from somebody else's point of view.
Yeah, and there's lots of little things around that. Is if you have a sort of certain way of thinking, give the case for the other way of thinking. Like a debate, I suppose, something like that. But it just gets you into the way of not just accepting what you think as being true, because in effect, our thoughts are not true and they're not real. They have a real effect, obviously, because that's leads us into what we perceive. But I suppose if they were true and they were real, then everybody would think the same thing. But
and that's not to invalidate situations either. You know, people worry about real things. That's not to we're not disputing that, especially in the current climate. People are worried about money. They're worried about paying the bills. They're worried about jobs. They're worried about friends, friendships. Worries are real, and it's fine to worry about those, but actually the extent to which you worry and whether you need to worry and whether there's any action you can take to minimize that worry or to stop worrying about it, those are the things that you need to be asking yourself as well. If it's worry, if it's stress, if it's a stress response, then that's something that's happening in the present moment. You know, do you need to be stressed? Is this something that's happening right now? That's how you can identify it as stress. If it's something that you're worried about that hasn't happened or might not ever happen, that's more likely to be anxiety. And then, do you need to do that? Do you need to create that feeling that doesn't feel nice based on something that's not even likely or happening?
On that point, that'd be quite a good point to end on, because it sort of summed it up quite nicely. I'll just muddy the waters if I keep talking.
Well, we don't want to bore everybody on our first one back either.
No. If anybody has any suggestions for what they would like us to talk to you, or as Abi nicely puts it, bore you with, do get in touch and we'll put something together.